What we want to share with you today is very exciting and interesting. And also, I was just thinking about this since we are in a large lecture hall. I feel like seat selection says a lot about you as a college student, right? Like, exactly. That's where I was. That's where I was, and I was always the one chit-chatting. So I'm going to ask my friends in the back maybe not to chit-chat. And if you want to come a little closer, we'd love to see you a little closer. Um, for those of you that I have not had the opportunity to meet yet, my name is Jennifer Brown-Lerner. I'm the Deputy Director of the Sports and Society Program. Um, that means I do a lot of different things and hope that they all work. No. What I have been doing since I joined the team is really, I've been lucky enough to work with many of our community projects and our community partners. And we've talked a lot about what's been going on here in Baltimore, our host for this year's summit. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of terrific things here in Baltimore. But Project Play has been working in 15 additional communities in addition to Baltimore. And so today we are going to get to hear from some of these other communities and the work that they have done since the publication or with the forthcoming publication of their State of Play report. Each presenter has a short opening presentation. And I'm going to invite them up one by one to give their presentation, and then we will jump into some panel discussion and leave some time for your questions. So, Evan, you're up first. You want to control your slides? You want me to?
Sure. Hi, thanks so much for coming. Events like this are really, I think, important, not only for networking, but these little breakout groups, I think, is where I usually get the most out of conferences like this. So it's a small number of people, and I think under those circumstances, it's an opportunity for us to really connect with one another and hopefully help you and your communities figure out whatever it is that you're working on. So I work for the Aspen Institute, and my department is very unique within the beast that is the Institute. Raise your hand if you feel strongly about raising your hand saying that you know a lot about the Institute. So yeah, one guy, two guys, three guys. So the Aspen Institute is a sprawling organization that covers a wide range of the human experience on planet Earth. It's everything from science and technology to health and medicine to business and economics, arts and culture. It really is the entirety of the human experience. We have over 600 employees and over 13 offices around the country, in 13 countries around the world. My little department of the Aspen Institute is unique in that it is place-based. While most of the departments of the Aspen Institute are really global in their thinking, mine is really hyper-focused on a very small part of rural Colorado. It was only founded in 2019. I was hired in 2020, so I'm not very old, and I'm still trying to figure out what it is, so bear with me. In my learning, what I've come up with so far is to bring people together, convene. That's what the Institute does, right? So we promote dialogue. We want to try to get everybody into the room. We want to try to increase understanding. I want to understand your perspective. My hope is that you're going to want to understand mine. My hope is that we're going to try to identify who is not at the table, who's not in the room and really ought to be, who doesn't have a voice in our discussion about whatever it is that we're talking about, and how do we amplify that voice? And also, hopefully, my end game is really to try to facilitate regional collaboration. I think that we're better together. And if we can talk about and understand each other, maybe we can agree that if we share our resources and our expertise, if we can look for opportunities for more regionally collaborative solutions, we can probably help more people in more sustainable ways. So the flagship of my department is called the Hurst Leaders Forum. The Hurst Leaders Forum is sort of the juice that gets everything going. It's the glue that keeps everything together. What I do is I convene about 25 very local community leaders once a year for a 6-week immersion. And what we do is we convene in seminar format in typical Aspen Institute fashion. We use historic pieces of literature and contemporary pieces of literature too as conversation starters. We'll read a passage of something. Sometimes it's something that you've heard of. Sometimes it's something that you haven't heard of. And we use those conversations to kick off conversations about your personal values. What do you believe? And do you see those values reflected in public policy? And if not, why not? And as community leaders, what opportunities do we have to try to influence public policy together in community? So my portfolio is focused in 4 areas. I'm a one-person department, and so I'm sort of limited. This list started as 10 things, and it included everything from transportation to broadband internet to universal preschool and on and on and on. But because I'm only one person, I had to focus. And so I started with better jobs closer to home, economic vitality for the folks that live in my region. We're talking about an 80-mile corridor. It's less than 90,000 people. But each community, 14 unique and distinct municipalities, 3 counties, 4 school districts, very, very small communities, and they're spread out far away from each other. So in that geography, a lot of our lowest income residents commute the longest distances to low-wage jobs in Pitkin County. That's Aspen, Colorado, right? So huge wealth disparity in my region, about 70% Anglo, about 30% Latino. So most of those low-wage jobs are folks that are traveling the longest distances. So how do we bring better jobs closer to home for the vast majority of people who live in our region? Housing stability, the cost of living is exorbitant. It's cost prohibitive to live where I live. How do we improve access to affordable housing? How are we thinking about social emotional wellness? For those of you that know about the Paradise Paradox, mountain resort communities of the West in particular have a disproportionately high incident rate of substance abuse, domestic violence, depression, anxiety, and most importantly, suicide. Far and away the national average, mountain resort communities of the West. So how are we understanding that and coming to terms with regionally collaborative solutions? And then, you know, when the mountain behind your house is on fire again, how are we getting in front of disasters regionally in a collaborative way? So our state of play started last year. We're about to publish our findings. Our report comes out. Do me a favor, give me a couple of fingers, 1 minute, 2 minutes, something like that. Our state of play report started last year. We're about to publish our findings. From a 60,000-foot view, this is what we think we've learned from our data. We've got over 1,000 kids, which might not sound like a lot, but it's a fair number of folks when you're talking about rural communities. Over 1,000 kids responded to student surveys that were distributed. We did one-on-one interviews and focus groups over a period of about 9 months. And what we think we've learned is that our local youth are slightly less physically active than the national average. About 22% of those surveyed said that they exercised 60 minutes a day. It's abysmal. This is an unacceptable number. Kids are not engaging in physical activity. What we know is that more physical activity translates to better mental health. Of those students that were surveyed, 3 times the number of folks that said that they were physically active 60 minutes a day, 3 times that rate said that they experienced depression, anxiety, those symptoms of the symptomology of suicidality and those sorts of things. Transportation to and from sports and recreational opportunities is a pervasive barrier. So the farther you live away from Aspen, Colorado, the harder it is to access recreational opportunities. Our Latino youth participate in outdoor recreation far less than their white peers. And by far, soccer is the most popular sport in our Latino and Latinx communities. So what we want to hope to do is take our advisory committee partners, these are the folks that helped us to collect all of this data and understand it, is try to work with them in regionally collaborative ways to make sure that we are looking at viable opportunities to offer what kids are asking for. More affordability, more ease in the process of looking for scholarshiping opportunities to make things more affordable, improve access to transportation, whether it's bringing public transportation buses closer to where kids go to school so that they can get rides to those locations, or bringing those recreational activities closer to where kids already are. So there's a number of other recommendations that are coming out in this report. Hopefully, this time next year, you'll be able to pick a copy up on the table the way that you did with Tacoma. That's probably my time. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Hello, I'm Charnon with the Central Ohio Youth Sports Collaborative. We are just getting started. So I've been in my job for my 3-month anniversary will be on the 19th. So when we talk about the amount of things I've gotten done, let's be realistic, okay? Okay, I just want to put that out there. All right, so our research was done over November 19 to December 2020, which, let's be real, was not the greatest. We didn't have as many opportunities to reach folks because we weren't seeing people. Everybody was in their homes and working from home and going to school from home, and sports were shut down for a majority of that time. So our research findings showed that the number one reason kids play is because they want to be with their friends. I'm an incredibly social person. That was the reason why I started sports. My best friend across the street was a swimmer. I was like, guess who's a swimmer now? Me. And so that's what I did. Financial barriers, are one of the main blocks for our kids to participate in sports, specifically Black youth and then elementary school kids more than middle school and high school kids. The safe access to play areas across the region, white youth have way more opportunities than the Black youth, and they felt safer in those spaces as well. So they had more in the suburbs, way more green space than in the city. And then the youth reported that pressure from coaches, organized sports, and the lack of personal time is the reason they want to play sports. They don't want to have to commit their entire social life to just playing sports. They want to be able to see their friends, see their family, do their homework. So being involved in sports all the time, 24/7, is not something they were interested in. And then standardized coaches training was inconsistent. So some of our organizations were doing them, some were not. When the study was going on, I was with the Columbus Recreation and Parks Department, and we had just started trying to do some coaches training with our staff and our volunteers. But because the volunteers are parents and community members, they weren't always able to come. So one session they might get trained, the next they might not. And if you couldn't, I could make staff mandatory. Like, it was mandatory for staff, but it was hard to get it to become mandatory for volunteers. Our kids are interested in esports, which I had to be honest, had to take some convincing for me, because I'm like, oh, so we just gonna let these kids sit? That's not what I believe. But I have now since come around through some research of my own, and the fact that if the kids say they want it, it's our job to provide what they would like to do. And then being from Columbus, that's where the Ohio State University is. And it's kind of a shocking stat when I saw this, that tackle football participation is down 27% across the state, which was shocking to me. All right, I know this is a lot of words. Don't worry about it. I'll say most of it. So we got here by a really circuitous route. Like, we went through the mountains, through the woods, and everything to get here. So because our research was done when it was done, once our report came out, we were doing nothing. Like, we were still at home, trying to do virtual programming. And since I worked for the city, we were one of the last youth sports programs to come back, because how would it look if the city was like super spreader event? Like, we can't be that group. So we were one of the last folks to come back to programming. So our initial group started, and we started to get to talking, and then everybody was like, nope, this isn't the time. We'll circle back in a few months. And every few months, We were having meetings and trying to chat and come back, and it was like, nope, still not ready. Nope, still not ready. So finally in early 2022, our first like real year back to all of our sports, all of our leagues, we finally got together and a steering committee was involved. So most of the people that were involved in the research were also involved in this steering committee. And so when we got together, we were talking like, well, who should be in this? What do we want to do? What is our plans? How do we see this organization coming together? And luckily, we were able to come together because a lot of the folks in the room were thinking the same thing, like our kids aren't playing, they don't want to do things, we got to get them up and moving. So we started looking for funding, because if we're going to do this, it couldn't be out of just one of the city, it couldn't be out of just the Rec and Park Department, it couldn't be just out of the Y or just the Boys and Girls Club, it needed to be with everybody, which, by the way, was a suggestion in our report. So it was to build a coalition where we all come together to make this work happen. So we started searching for funding. So once through mid to late 2022, we had our advisory group, we created an advisory group, and we created our charter, and we got funding for the first 3 years through the generosity of the Columbus Foundation, the Lindy Infante Foundation, the Columbus Blue Jackets, and the Columbus Youth Foundation, and they dedicated funding for 3 years. So that was super exciting. That meant we actually could get started, we could get moving. So in early 2023, we were here. It was a real thing, and we were able to get started. I was still with the city, so I was part of the steering committee. Didn't know I was going to end up here, but yay for me. And then we started to look at the bylaws. We used the Philadelphia Youth Sports Collaborative as an example. They've been a great help to me personally and to our organization, sharing their knowledge and how they got started. And then our bylaws were completed. Hiring committee formed to find an executive director. We had our mission and our vision completed. Board development began. And then boom, January 2024, I got here. So that was an exciting time for me. So in the first couple of months that I've been at this job, it's really just been about getting our name out there, introducing myself to people, especially since I'd been with the city for so long. Everybody knew me in one avenue, and now they had to relearn who I was personally. But then getting to know the folks that are on our board. I knew most of them through partnerships when I worked with the city, and so now, once again, trying to find a new relationship. I started talking to other organizations that are doing this. So folks in Milwaukee, I've talked to folks in Philadelphia, I've talked to King County, I've talked to, if you have a collaborative, if I haven't talked to you yet, I will be finding you and calling you, because I want to know what you know. So we started creating a website. We have a beta version, yay. Still looking for a logo. If you know any talented people, we will accept it. And creating social media accounts, writing content for our website, and a lot of it, honestly, is just getting out and building relationships with the community. Through the city, I had a really good opportunity to meet a lot of folks through programming or permits or partnerships, but there's a vast amount of people that I have not met yet. Columbus has grown as a city. We have a very large Bhutanese and Nepali population, a very large Somali population, and there's language barriers there. So I am using whatever partnerships and conversations and relationships I have to meet those folks, so I can get out there and deliver what they need. But most of our conversations have been about that. And then, because I want this to be sustainable past the 3 years that we already have funding, still looking for grants, completing grants and reports from grants that were given to us before I got on board. So writing reports for that. But yeah, that has been our very, like I said, circuitous way of getting here. It wasn't a straight path. Everybody worked together really well. Our boards come together really well. And we're still forming what exactly our organization will be doing, but our general goals are set. But how we're going to do it is what we're still working on. So that's it. Oh, here you go, Kara.
All right, good afternoon. That was horrible. Good afternoon. Much better. Before we get into what I'm going to say, I have something very important to do. Go blue. Okay, I was like, please. I just cringed in my seat like the whole time. Sorry. Okay, now back to business. So just a little bit about our work and what we're doing. My name is Kari Pardoe, and I have been working at the Wilson Foundation for about 2.5 years. But just a little bit of context of why we're here. So the Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Foundation was an idea that Mr. Wilson here came up with prior to his passing. So this was something that he had set in motion a long time before. Mr. Wilson owned the Buffalo Bills. Go Bills as well. Absolutely. I was going to get to that, but we can go Bills. Go Bills. Go Bills. Come on. We love all Western New York and Southeast Michigan sports. So we have to. That's what we do. But so Mr. Wilson planned after his passing that they would sell the team. And all of the assets from that, as well as some of his other companies, went to then form this foundation. We are a different type of foundation. We're a spend-down foundation, so we have 20 years to spend down all of our assets. We are at about 10 and a half years left. So the countdown clock is on for us, and we are constantly thinking about how do we build systems and think about ways to leave this space much better when we are gone. So we end January 2035, not that we're counting. But so youth sports and rec, obviously, because of owning the Bills and his experience in sports, is one of our top priority focus areas. And so when the foundation started in 2015, we were trying to figure out, what does this mean? What does it look like to do youth sports and rec? And so we then stumbled across this organization that you may have heard of called the Aspen Institute and Project Play, and decided that we were going to start partnering with these amazing folks. And we did 3 state of play reports. Yours is coming. It's coming. It will be here soon. And so we did one for Western New York, one then for the greater Rochester Finger Lakes area. This is like a little in the weeds, but that is a part of Western New York, but it's a bit farther from our areas. And then the other is Southeast Michigan, because what we have done is Mr. Wilson is from Southeast Michigan, so we wanted to support Southeast Michigan and Western New York. We serve 16 counties across the 2 regions. So these state of play reports then in 2017 were done, and then this was really how we looked to this research, just like you heard from my other 2 partners in crime here today, to help guide our work. So we really look at the 8 plays that came out of the Aspen Institute for our work that we do. And so that's constantly driving our work and trying to make sure that things are connected. So then, just kind of skipping ahead here a little bit, I want to give a shout out though. Ooh, I skipped ahead too fast, sorry. I have a couple people I want to shout out, and I could shout out a lot, but Connie is here with me. Connie, she's still mad at me right now. Connie, wave your hand. Connie works with us at the foundation and couldn't do any of this without her. So just a huge appreciation for her. And then we have lots of people in here from Southeast Michigan, Western New York, and our Project Play team. So thank you all for being here. But just a little bit about this. So we really believe once we got these reports and started guiding our work, how do you ask kids what they want? How do you provide free play? How do we do those types of things? But what we really looked at is how to create a little bit of a different model. And that is a 3-legged stool that we have created. That's what we think anyways. And that is that we believe that it is super important to have people on the ground doing this work, day in and day out. While the foundation is on the ground, we're not doing this. We're not in the weeds doing it, understanding what do kids need, what do the program providers need. And so our 3-legged stool, this first leg, is our community foundation partners, which houses Project Play Southeast Michigan and Project Play Western New York. So those teams are housed at the community foundation. We provide a grant to the community foundation to support the staffing, to support the work that they're doing. And they're the ones on the ground really understanding and have a pulse of what's going on. And we're building the coalition with many of the folks that are in the room and others to bring people together, to figure out what do we do, how do we move the needle for youth sports. The second piece of that stool then is the Aspen Institute that provides this, right? Provides the data, the research, understanding of what's happening in other communities and countries to help us think about how can we do this better. And the third stool is then Wilson, who has money to put towards this. So that's kind of our three-legged stool that we think about all the time. I just want to give a couple highlights here because I think that this is important. Because you might say, like, that's great, you have staff, what are they doing? What's happening there as a result of that? So in Western New York, just a few little things, they have working groups that are focused on different areas and issues. They are focusing on like capacity building, tackling individual sports where we're having a lifeguard crisis. So they're looking at how do we then help actually get people trained so kids can go swim in Buffalo, right? How do we help to do those things that connects all the way to water sports? There's this whole circle of thinking how Aaron and team have thought about that. They're doing coaches training and coaches recognition events. I was in the previous session about coaches training, how important it is, how we're having a lack of that. So how are we working on those things? Capacity building initiatives, community conversations like annual events, conferences, trainings, and a big shout out, in-house league. They're just creating a revitalization of baseball, softball in Buffalo to provide so far over 800 kids an opportunity for the first time to play this summer. So shout out, let's give them a little applause. Yay, team. In Southeast Michigan, they also have been doing work groups focusing on coaches training, girls in sports, capacity building, and sports sampling, and really looking at building their coalition. How do they bring people together? And then shout out to that team who just got done completing the NFL draft, where there was an opportunity to lift up youth sports. And I think that's the greatest part, right? It was, yes, there were all these events and things that were happening, but we got to elevate the importance of youth sports and show why does that matter. So, and a big shout out, I see Roxanne from the Lions is here, who was our huge partner through all of that. So that's just a couple of things. But in summary, to date, we've granted out $100 million more than in youth sports and rec in our 2 regions. In addition to that, we also then have something endowments at each community foundation, which those teams manage, that has given out over $10 million in support. And those endowments will be there forever to provide smaller grants, 5 to 20, depending on, to help support youth sports organizations. So we're trying to build this bigger system as we go. How are we doing? Is this making sense? I'm trying to go very quick. Okay. So what I'm supposed to now really be talking about is our Built to Play initiative, but just needed to set some context. So again, right, 2015 we start, 2017 Stay to Play report, and then in 2018 we decided to start an initiative called Built to Play. What we had continually and still do here is that kids don't have a place to play, right? Like how can I just go play? I need a court, I need a field, I want a playground, I would like a skate park, all these things. So what we decided to do is start an initiative in partnership with Kaboom, and what was then the Tony Hawk Project is now the Skate Park Project, and started off to try to build these skate parks, playgrounds, and play everywhere spaces across our 2 regions. We ended up providing over $17 million to build over 90 skate parks, playgrounds, and play everywhere spaces in our 2 regions. And so that's really what we're excited to talk about today as well, is that our evaluation report just came out. But what you can see, if this makes any sense in this map up here, is that they're scattered everywhere. We really made sure that these got out into our rural communities, which is harder to do because there was a match requirement. And so we had to really think about how do we work with these communities, how do they leverage resources differently, but also as funders, how do we think differently? So maybe the 2-to-1 match that was required for Detroit might not be the same for some of our rural communities, and how do we think about that differently? So with that investment then, in 2022, as I mentioned, we engaged our friends at GEL to do this report and to really look at, was this impactful? We know kids are playing, but did it actually have an impact? And so I could sit here and read you this 50-page report, but I'm not. In your little bags that you guys got this morning is a postcard, and there's a QR code, and you can scan it to get to our report, which looks like this. But to just really talk about, I think there's a few quick items just to highlight, and then resources for you all. is that what we found is that it fostered greater physical and social activity, of course, right? Like, makes sense, kids are playing. But they were doing it in different ways, because what we did with all these projects is ask kids what they want. The adults were not driving this. It was the kids asking them, what do you want in your community? The second thing is that we really looked at environmental focuses. So thinking about how do we build in sustainability, but also thinking about greenways and different things to make sure it was environmentally friendly to be there. But the other piece, I love these two pieces, is that in Howell, Michigan, which won't mean a lot to all of you, but a smaller community, they created their play space area in the heart of downtown. And what it has done is actually significantly increased the foot traffic in their downtown, which has increased their spending, right? Because parents are bringing their kids down, they're playing, and then it's this ripple effect out that we are seeing from this. And the last highlight to share is, and this is just a quote, so this is in one of our very rural communities in Western New York. And it says, one of the moms who is a tribal marshal and I were pushing carts back and forth during build day. This did more in building trust in the community than any other project I've worked on. To me, like, understanding that community is the tribal community wasn't really always integrating, right, with the community next to them. And this was able to break down barriers in a way that had never been done, and now they're able to work on other projects. So there's just some ripple effects that we're seeing from this that we're really excited about. But the bigger thing is, for this evaluation, what we wanted to do is to help all of you and to help others. If you were going to do something like this, how could you even start? And what are the things that you should look at? And what are the things we screwed up with that are lessons learned that would help you? So this is designed to help you do these 6 steps. So if you want to think about, like, how do I build a case? How do I think about getting money? How can I get the city on board, or the county, or the rec department, or whoever it is? It will walk you through the things to consider as you're doing this. And you can take this idea and concept, right? It doesn't have to be about a skate park or a playground. It could be about a court, a field, anything else, and take this stuff and think about it and use it as a model. I'm going to pause because I feel like we're going to talk instead. Does that sound good? Okay.
All right. Take your seats and your microphone. Take your seats and your microphone. Oh, no, we're gonna go back. Okay. So I hate to continue to talk at you, but I'm the moderator, so I get to ask the first question. And for those of you that know me are not going to be surprised where I'm going to go first with this question. I want to talk about all this data. Okay, we got a lot of information now, and I think that information is great, and folks, heard some really interesting statistics. Okay, tackle football is down in Ohio. I don't know if that's going to impact their university level teams or not.
It's amazing. That is amazing. We're happy.
But what I want to say, and Kari, I want to start with you, is that, now that you have all this information, in what ways do you think you're going to, you've told us some of the ways that you're going to make it actionable, but for folks that are on the ground or folks that are decision makers, what way is can the data continue to be actionable?
I think the data is important for a couple reasons. Again, I talked about the 8 plays, right, that Aspen puts out. And that's what drives all of our grant making. So if it doesn't fit in those 8 plays and it doesn't connect somehow, we're not going to consider it. And so, I think that's the biggest piece, is that data, that information is telling us what we need to do. It is telling us to revitalize in-house leagues. It's telling us to think about sports sampling. It's telling us, right, all these things that then if you look at what the project play teams are doing on the ground, it is all based on those things. Those are their work groups. That's what they're trying to work towards. The other thing is that people need a rallying cry. People need something to say, like, okay, so if we do this, if we're going to put money into youth sports, or if I'm going to show up at your meeting and talk about this, why? Well, we heard earlier today, right, the 63 by 30. So that is, for instance, as a way for us to say, okay, in our two regions, how can we all work together to actually move that needle, to really show that we're improving those things? So I feel like it's the rallying cry, getting funders behind it, and raising awareness. That's the other thing is I think we are not great at telling our story. And I think we need to use this data, put it out there more, which is what we're trying to do and got to do in Southeast Michigan with the draft a couple weeks ago. But that's, I think, what drives our work.
So, Evan, the data is going to be relatively new to your community. So, in what ways do you think it's going to help foster the missions that you have around engaging in dialogue and fostering collaboration? You're not sure?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. We need to get everybody in the same room, looking at looking at our numbers and trying to assess whether or not they agree with what they're finding. I have questions, honestly. This is my first time doing anything like this. I'm not a statistician. I don't know how to collect data and crunch numbers and make sense of everyone else's systems. I mean, if you think about all of the different agencies and organizations and institutions in your respective communities that look at and collect data and maybe hopefully distribute that data, is it apples to apples in your communities? Show of hands if you think all the data collected in your region is apples to apples.
No.
So probably not. It's probably not. Yeah, exactly. So we need to find that context. Now that we've got something to look at and talk about, we have to see if we can agree on some things. For me, the question is always, what is the common ground? What can we agree on? Is there some shared vision of where we hope to get, and how are we going to get there? I don't know if we've been talking to the right people, quite honestly. I don't know if there are other people that weren't at the table that really should have been. To me, that's opportunity. That means that I need to make a list of those individuals and go have coffee with all of them and hopefully invite them into the conversation. And then at every step, look for opportunities. How are we engaging kids? How are we getting the kids, amplifying the kids' voices and getting them at the table to tell us, these adults with these purse strings, you know, what they think we ought to be, how we ought to be spending that money.
No, I think that's great because I think what you're saying is that data without, data without context is not going to be valuable, but data without building the relationships and creating an environment to foster collaboration is probably going to fall flat. And so, Shar, I'm actually going to turn to you because you spend a lot of time talking about, in this time period, it was, between when your report was released and now, it was all about building relationships. Yeah. So what value do you think those relationships have brought to the work that you're going to do moving forward?
Oh, I think it's meant everything. Honestly, I think because of the working with the city and working with this new organization with the Central Ohio Youth Sports Collaborative, I've gotten to meet so many people and hear their voices and, like Evan said, making sure the right people are at the table to have those conversations. And even if it's just, when you're a new organization, every conversation, interaction, introduction can matter so much, right? Because it could turn into a new partnership. It could turn into a funding source. It could turn into, a new program, something, anything. And so, and I by nature am a chatty person, so I don't know strangers. So for me, it's also a bit of enjoyment. But because I care so much about Central Ohio, I was born there, I was raised there. I spend all my time there. I care about that community. I want to make sure that I'm hearing from everybody in that community, not just the folks that I know. Being a proud East Side girl, I need to go over to the West Side. I need to go over to the South Side. I need to find out about those smaller organizations. When you work for the city, you are the organization, right? You're the bigger organization. But that means that there were folks in small pockets of the city that I may have never been to that I didn't get a chance to talk to and I don't know anything about. And so those relationships, those larger relationships then can trickle down and I get to meet new people through some of the relationships I've built with the folks that I've always been around, And like I said, with Columbus changing as much as it has in the last 10 years, there's a whole lot of new people that we have to get to meet and get to know and get to start to build that trust, so they don't think, oh, here comes this new organization coming in, making all these promises, and then leaving us, because that happens. And I am going to fight my hardest to we're not going to be that. We're going to be someone that's there. We're going to be sustainable, and we're going to continue to be with our community, because I just care so much about Central Ohio.
I just wanted to add in, because Evan, I feel like you're like, is this the right people? Do we have the right people? When you presented, though, Charnon and I both were like, the ballet. Yeah. Did you guys see, like, the ballet was on his list of folks? And we're like, yeah. Like, so, like, even though we've been doing this forever, right? Like, again, we're all learning from each other and thinking about it in different ways. But that's how we're going to figure out, like, who is missing from that table, right? It's from all of us learning. So I just want to say, like, we both were like, oh, like, we can do better.
You say ballet like it's ballet. It's the Aspen Santa Fe Ballet Dance Company, but it's not the ballet. It's the folklorico. So this is representative of our Latino culture in our region. This particular dance troupe is winning international folklorico competitions in Las Vegas year after year after year. So it's top notch, and it's also culturally representative and culturally affirming activity programming. And I tell you what, anybody that does folklorico or watches folklorico, y'all know that this is athletic. This is athletic activity. So.
I had a friend that used to dance for that company. We're old now, but he was great when he was there.
So but I think we just have to think about it from different ways. Like last week on Friday, and I see Ashley's in the room on our Project Play team, but like she had someone from archery come in. Like we also have to think about like out of the box things. It's not just flag football, basketball, volleyball, right? If you're really thinking about the sports sampling and stepping out of the norm, and that's again how we're going to continue to build these partnerships and think differently.
And let's talk about archery for a second, because I feel like I have to. There are some other communities in the room. I see Tacoma here in the front. Archery often comes up, also Oakland. Archery also often comes up as a sport that kids want to try. And interestingly, in Oakland, kids are often exposed to archery because there is an archery range in a public facility that they can get access to through Parks and Recs. And so they want to keep doing it, but they don't necessarily have. Okay, that's just my archery soapbox. What I want to ask one more question before we open it up. And Evan, I want to start with you, because I think we oftentimes talk about urban areas and what urban areas need in terms of access. But the region that you're focused on is almost exclusively rural. So what are some of the challenges that you think about both having these conversations in rural areas, and what are some of the challenges just generally that rural areas are facing in terms of sport and physical activity and outdoor recreation?
Okay, to answer that question, I want to see a show of hands. How many of you self-identify as coming from a rural community or representing a rural community? That's actually more than what I thought it was going to be. How many of you feel like your region's issues have been equitably represented at this conference?
Yeah, they have. We'll claim that.
Okay. So to me, the answer is connectivity. We feel far removed from a lot of things happening. I don't have an Under Armour in my region that's going to support my local everything. Thank you. I don't have a Denver Broncos in my region. They're often, or a Avalanche, or a Rockies. They're often very focused on the urban kids in Metro Denver and the surrounding communities. And so when you get 3.5 hours over the Rocky Mountains, over the Continental Divide, a lot of those rural communities are forgotten. And so for me, it's not just connectivity among the municipalities and counties where we live in our little corner of the Rocky Mountains, because you get Summit County and they're on the other side of the geography. We've got these mountains that separate us, right? So we are far removed from each other, even within our own regions. And so connectivity becomes an answer to that question. How do we create bridges, both literal and figurative bridges, where we can see each other and know each other and take each other's calls and go attend each other's meetings, talk about where are the gaps in services and how can we fill those gaps by more collaborative, brainstorming. How do we connect to Aspen philanthropy, which is on one end of our region, and how do we connect that philanthropy, which is ultimately, these are global billionaires that live in Aspen. How do we connect some of those resources to our most disparate communities on the farthest reaches of our boundaries out in Parachute and Battlement Mesa that have very little? So, and then how do we connect all of that to other regions in our part of Colorado and then back to urban Metro Denver, where the real money is, where the real interests are? So for me, it's about, when I found out that Project Play and State of Play is going to be, planting a flag in the state of Colorado, to me, that's a real opportunity for us to establish this greater network of like-minded, thought-provoking, collaborative reaching individuals, agencies, and organizations that really see the value in collaboration. I hope that answers the question.
No, I think that totally answers the question. And I want to acknowledge that both Southeast Michigan, Western New York, and Central Iowa have rural communities as part of their regions. And I'm not going to let you answer the question because I want to move to audience Q&A. Oh, okay. So I want to open it up for audience Q&A, and I'm going to run the mic to you. And I see a hand in the back. Oh, excellent. Right over here, if you don't mind. Sorry. Glasses and a white top.
Question, can it be a comment?
Of course you can make
Okay.
a comment.
I heard a plea, and it was, how do we, because we're rural, one of the things, I'm in here because I couldn't get in the one I wanted to get in, and maybe you should have been in that one too. I want to see the word collaboration and consortium, and we're not talking about that as much, but there needs to be networks throughout the state. I'm from Maryland, so I've got rural and I've got cosmopolitan, all in our state. But one of the things that when I used to work in alcohol and drug prevention, and one of the things that made it work in our state was that all of those communities, all of those segments of our state had a place where they came together and they problem solved and worked together. So I think as we're looking, it's very important to have those connections. So you don't have to go outside of your state, because there's probably someone in your area doing what you need, and there's somebody who's doing something that you're doing something someone else could benefit from. So we need to start talking within our space.
Thank you. We couldn't agree more. And here at Project Play, we are doing our job both to create more opportunities for folks to talk to each other at the local, at the regional, and at the state level. Because when you come to the Project Play Summit, you get to talk about what's going on at the national level. So that is our hope moving forward. All right, I see some more hands. I'm going to do sunglasses in the back over there. Sorry, I can barely see. I just see the sunglasses.
Thank you. Question. So a good segue into building collaborations, coalitions, whatever you'd like to call it. Have you all navigated the slightly different goals that the different stakeholder groups will have? So, for example, one group might be more interested in nutrition, one might be more interested in physical activity, one might be more interested in sport participation specifically, and how you could bring them all together without, when those different groups have a little different priorities, though they're all similar and related.
Great question. Who wants to go? Go for it.
So, so in Central Ohio, like, we said we have rural, we have urban, everything. But when we were bringing folks together and we're talking about, like you said, nutrition and health, I think we tried to find one common thing. So if you're talking nutrition, you're talking health, you're talking sport, mental wellness, it was just, how can we get kids to feel better about being active? And that was something that we could use to encompass all of those things to start. And then I think once you've got something overarching, then you can create kind of what like King County has. They have like these action teams, or like you all have, you mentioned the same thing. Then you can bring those groups together, have committees, action teams, whatever you want to call them, to then tackle those individual goals that some of those organizations may have. So getting everybody together, look, this is what the umbrella is going to do, and then we'll have spokes. Because here's what I and the reason why I think it's important to do it that way is because we want people to be great at what they're great at. So if you are great at nutrition, I don't want to dim your light. I want you to be great at working on that. So if we can create a team of people who are great at that, then we have the best doing the best thing that they do. And then, whatever other goals that your organization wants to accomplish.
Great answer. All right. I saw a hand here, right there. Yeah.
Park City Community Foundation. So I had a question for you, Evan, because I feel like we have a lot of similarities in our communities. I was curious how, and then maybe for you all too, just how you collaborate and address just language barriers that exist in the communities, because I feel like it's a huge issue. Law systems are still in English. A lot of things are in English, and there's families who want to put their kids into sports, and that shouldn't be a barrier.
I don't know if I'm the best person to answer this. Most of our language barriers are English and Spanish, and the other way around, Spanish and English. We don't have the Bhutanese and Nepali and Somalia. So for us, we're sort of this bilingual culturally community. We want to make sure that first of all, I want to address, it's not just do you speak Spanish? It's not just the bilingual. It's, are you culturally affirming? Do you have a life experience that affirms someone's cultural identity? Just because I don't speak Spanish, and I'm running out of reasons why I don't speak Spanish, so I apologize. But I think that we need to make sure that our agencies and organizations and direct service providers and mental health professionals, we're not just talking about bilingual. It's really difficult where we live, as it's true in Park City as well, because of the cost of living. And so having people come to the region that are not already there is really difficult. Retention is impossible. Recruiting is impossible. It's just, nobody can afford to live there. The housing shortage that exists everywhere is amplified 10x in and around these mountain resort communities, where you get these billionaires and millionaires that just buy everything out. And so there's no inventory, there's no affordability, there's no accessibility. And so people with disabilities and our LGBTQ and all of our priority populations, quote unquote priority populations, our most marginalized individuals and their households and their families, they're the ones that are really shouldering the biggest burdens in our region. So we have to, when we talk about bilingual, yes, it's important, and yes, it's our interpreters and our translators are very, very busy. Bringing more of them to the region is very difficult. Trying to recruit from those that already live in the community is very difficult, because the agencies and organizations that are hiring them can't afford to pay them a living wage, and so they can't afford to stay. It's very, very difficult, to answer your question.
All right, I'm going to have you go to Aaron back there, who, yeah, he knows, right? Oh, yeah. He'll tell you. I'm going to give him a little time on the mic.
Wow, I actually had a question.
Perfect.
Okay, great.
But before you do that,
Yeah.
you can just quickly give 30 seconds about translating and what you've been working on.
Yeah. So with a lot of, speaking Spanish, no habla español, we had to do a collaborative league where there's Spanish-speaking areas and English-speaking areas, and combine those. So with technology, making a universal registration form, we partnered with MLB, and when they built this site, there was a way that you could use Google Translate, and just click of a button will be able to translate the whole site into Spanish. So we were very mindful, even before we did that, to any forms that we did, we made sure we translated everything, because we wanted to be culturally sensitive, because there's some parents out there that only spoke Spanish, and if they're signing up their kid and they have problems doing that. So we made sure from the very beginning to make sure that all registration forms, anything on the website, had the ability to be able to translate into a different language, and it did work.
Okay, you only get
yeah.
30 seconds
Okay,
for
there
your
we go.
question now.
Thank you. So my question is really to the Columbus, Ohio, and to Colorado. How are you guys capturing the youth voice? Well, in your instance, in the outskirts and in the rural areas, and then in the maybe urban areas of Columbus, how are you capturing youth voice, and what are you doing with it?
So, I mean, having been an organization for 2.5 months, not yet. I'll be honest. I'm just gonna be honest, right? Because we got to get a website, and do that first. However, a lot of the organizations that are involved within the collaborative do get through their programming, they do post-program research surveys. They go out and they talk to their communities in that way, and then we get their information and bring it into the collaborative as a whole. One of the things that is on our 1-3-5 goal year is creating a youth advisory board, because I get irritated because adults try to tell kids what's best for them, and they don't ever get to say anything, and then they become adults who don't know how to make decisions. And so we need to give them an opportunity to say things and give them a chance to speak up and tell us what they need and what they want. We'll create a whole program and then get upset that no one came because we didn't ask them if they wanted it in the first place. So we need to create the programs that they want. So one of the ways we plan on doing that is through these youth advisory boards, through going to schools. I have no problem. I'll show up. I'll show up at a program, even if it's not mine, and just ask. So we're going to encourage not just our board members, but any member organizations that are going to be involved. Find out what your kids want, and then let's see if we can bring them all together and find out as a whole what everybody wants. But I truly believe we need to, as adults, need to kind of take a step back and let kids lead what their programs are going to be.
So real quickly, I'm in a similar position. We haven't published our report yet, so we need to get our report. As soon as it's probably going to be the next month or so. Yeah. So it's coming up. We need to get it into the hands of kids. They need to look at it, and they need to understand it, and they need to tell us whether we missed the mark, or that we got it right. We only got 1,000 student surveys back, so we got to get a lot more information from a lot more people. We got to find out where our kids are already congregating, meeting, and convening with themselves. What are they talking about? What do they want? And whether that's amplified through student council in all of the school districts, if it's the newspapers that have student-published articles or sections of the paper that are published entirely by students, if it's podcasts or radio broadcasts, which we have, that are produced and kind of amplified with student voices. Let's start engaging kids where they already are, where they're already convening, how they're already putting their message out into the world, and see if we drew the right conclusions, or if they say, actually, no, we think that you missed this big chunk that was not even on your radar. So, and then we got to figure out what to do with that.
I know Aaron did not want me to answer, but I'm just, for everyone else, want to suggest also is what we're looking at, and I didn't even talk about this earlier, but is how we connect our work with youth sports and rec and after school. Because after school programs should be including sports every day. How do we help them do it better, right? There's so many tie-ins, connections, funding opportunities, strategies, all those things. But that is another platform and a way to ask kids what they want. So just want to throw that out. Deja has her hand raised.
Oh, well, look, I know that I have many friends that still have their hands up, but in lieu of additional questions, these folks are going to stay here for a few more minutes and be willing to answer your questions, because I want to make sure that I give folks a little bit of time, because we are reconvening at 3 p.m. in Shriver Auditorium, and I want to make sure that you get to enjoy the lovely Baltimore weather. or the RCX play space if you haven't already. But we will be here to answer some additional questions, and apologies for those of you that didn't get to speak your piece. Please join me in thanking these fabulous panelists.